1. Intro. You're not too emotional. You're just untrained. And that one misunderstanding is quietly controlling your life. Every reaction you regret, every moment you wish you handled differently, it's not weakness. It's a skill you were never taught. The Stoics knew this long ago. Emotional strength isn't about feeling less, it's about responding better. If this shifts how you see yourself, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers, and stay with me. 2. Define the problem. Most people grow up believing that being emotional is a flaw. If you feel deeply, react quickly, or struggle to stay calm under pressure, you're told something is wrong with you. So what do people do? They try to suppress it. They tell themselves to toughen up. 2. Stop overthinking. 2. Just move on. But suppression isn't strength, it's avoidance wearing a mask. The real problem isn't that people feel too much, it's that they were never taught what to do with those feelings once they arise. Emotions come fast, often before logic has time to catch up. And without training, most people simply react. They snap in conversations they later regret. They shut down when things get overwhelming. Or they carry silent resentment that slowly damages their relationships. This creates a cycle. The more you react impulsively, the more you start to believe you're bad with emotions. And that belief becomes part of your identity. You begin to think, that's just who I am. But that's not who you are. It's just how you've been responding. Modern culture doesn't help much either. It swings between two extremes. Either you should express everything instantly, or you should hide everything completely. But neither approach teaches control, neither builds awareness, and neither gives you the ability to pause in the moment that actually matters. The Stoics saw this differently. They didn't label emotions as good or bad. Instead, they focused on the space between stimulus and response, that brief moment where choice exists. Most people never notice that space. They move too quickly from feeling to reaction. And in that gap, where clarity could exist, there is only habit. So the problem isn't emotional intensity. It's the lack of training in how to process it. Without that training, emotions feel like something that happens to you. But with it, they become something you can work with. 3. Stoic insight. The Stoics didn't try to eliminate emotions. They trained their relationship with them. They understood something most people overlook. Emotions are not the enemy. They are signals, information, but like any signal, they can be misread if you don't know how to interpret them. When something happens, your mind reacts almost instantly. A tone of voice, a message left unanswered, a moment of disrespect. It triggers a feeling before you even have time to think. Most people assume that feeling is truth. The Stoics didn't. They questioned it. They believed that between what happens and how you respond, there is a space, and in that space lies your power. Not power to control the world, but power to choose your response. That's where emotional strength is built. Instead of saying, I'm angry, so I must act, they would pause and ask, what exactly am I reacting to? Is it the situation, or the story I'm telling myself about it? This single shift changes everything. Because once you see that your interpretation shapes your emotion, you realize you're not as powerless as you thought. The Stoics trained this daily, not in perfect conditions, but in ordinary moments, annoyances, delays, criticism, uncertainty. They didn't wait for life to calm down. They used life itself as the training ground. They also understood that resisting emotions makes them stronger. Ignoring frustration doesn't dissolve it, it stores it. And eventually, it surfaces in ways you can't control. So instead of suppression, they practiced awareness. They noticed the emotion, named it, and created distance from it. Not, I am angry, but, I feel anger. That subtle difference matters. One defines you, the other gives you space. Over time, this builds a different kind of strength. Not the kind that looks calm on the outside but breaks under pressure, but the kind that remains steady because it understands what's happening within. 4. Modern application, work. At work, emotional reactions often feel justified. A tight deadline, a critical email, a meeting that doesn't go your way. These moments trigger pressure. And pressure quickly turns into frustration. Most people respond automatically. They rush to defend themselves, send messages they later rethink, or carry tension into the rest of their day without even noticing it. But the real issue isn't the situation itself, it's the speed of your reaction. When something feels urgent, your mind treats it as important. And when it feels important, you assume it deserves an immediate response. That's where mistakes happen. A stoic approach at work doesn't mean becoming passive or silent. It means creating a pause before you respond. Even a few seconds can change the outcome. Instead of reacting to the first interpretation your mind produces, you question it. Is this actually a problem, or just a moment of discomfort? Is this worth reacting to now, or can it wait until I'm clear? This matters most in communication. A single sentence, written under tension, can damage trust, not because of what you intended, but because of how it's received. And once it's sent, you can't take it back. The Stoics understood this. They trained themselves to respond, not react. Another common challenge at work is internal pressure, the feeling that you must perform, prove yourself, or avoid mistakes at all costs. This pressure often creates anxiety, not clarity. And ironically, the more you try to control every outcome, the more unstable you feel. Stoic thinking shifts this focus. Instead of trying to control results, you focus on what is within your control, your effort, your preparation, your response. You do the work as well as you can, but you don't attach your emotional state to outcomes you can't fully control. Over time, this changes how you experience work. Stress doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls you. You still feel pressure, but you're not defined by it. You move from reacting under tension to acting with intention. 5. Modern application, relationships. In relationships, emotional reactions rarely stay small. A single moment, an unanswered text, a short reply, a change in tone, can quickly turn into a story in your mind. And that story often feels real. You assume something is wrong. You assume distance, rejection, or lack of care. And before you realize it, you're no longer responding to what actually happened. You're reacting to what you believe it means. This is where most relationships begin to weaken. Not because of major events, but because of repeated small reactions that slowly build tension. A comment said too quickly. A defensive tone. Silence used as protection instead of clarity. Over time, these patterns create distance that neither person intended. The Stoic approach doesn't remove emotion from relationships. It refines how you handle it. Instead of reacting immediately, you learn to pause and question your interpretation. Is this truly about the other person, or is it my own expectation? My own fear shaping this reaction? That pause can prevent unnecessary conflict. Another key challenge is the need for control. In relationships, people often try to control how they are perceived, how the other person behaves, or how situations unfold. But the more you try to control another person, the more tension you create, and the less genuine the connection becomes. Stoic thinking shifts your focus inward. You don't control the other person's feelings, timing, or actions, but you do control how you show up, your patience, your honesty, your ability to listen without immediately reacting. This creates stability, even when the relationship itself feels uncertain. It also changes how you handle difficult emotions like jealousy, insecurity, or disappointment. Instead of projecting them outward, you observe them first. You recognize that these feelings often come from internal assumptions, not external facts, and by understanding that, you reduce their power. Over time, this creates a different dynamic. Communication becomes calmer, reactions become more intentional, and trust grows, not because everything is perfect, but because both people feel safe enough to be understood, not judged. 6. Practice block. Understanding emotional control is one thing. Training it is something else entirely. The Stoics didn't rely on insight alone. They practiced consistently, deliberately, and often in small, unnoticed moments. Start with something simple: the pause. When you feel a strong emotion rising, anger, frustration, anxiety, don't act immediately. Give yourself a few seconds, not to suppress the feeling, but to create space around it. That space is where awareness begins. Next, observe without judgment. Instead of saying, "This shouldn't be happening," shift to, "This is what I'm feeling right now." That subtle change removes resistance. You're no longer fighting the emotion, you're understanding it. And what you understand, you can manage. Then, name it clearly, not vaguely, but specifically. Is it anger, or is it disappointment? Is it anxiety, or is it uncertainty? The more precise you are, the less overwhelming it becomes. Clarity reduces intensity. After that, reframe the situation. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? Is this truly a threat, or just discomfort? Is this personal or situational? This step doesn't deny reality, it expands your perspective. And with a wider perspective, your reaction becomes more intentional. Finally, choose your response, not based on impulse, but based on who you want to be in that moment. Calm doesn't mean passive. Control doesn't mean silence. It means responding in a way that aligns with your values, not your immediate emotion. This process won't feel natural at first. You'll forget. You'll react too quickly. That's part of it. Training emotional strength is no different than training a muscle. Repetition matters more than perfection. Over time, something shifts. The pause becomes automatic. The observation becomes clearer. And your reactions become slower, but stronger, not because you feel less, but because you understand more. 7. Reflection. Maybe the problem was never that you feel too much. Maybe it's that no one ever showed you what to do with what you feel. And because of that, you learn to react instead of respond, to protect instead of understand. But if you look closely, every difficult emotion carries a signal, not something to fear, but something to learn from. Anger can point to a boundary. Anxiety can reveal uncertainty. Disappointment can uncover expectations you didn't realize you had. When you slow down enough to notice, emotions stop controlling you and start teaching you. This doesn't mean you'll always get it right. You won't. There will still be moments where you react too quickly, speak too soon, or carry feelings longer than you should. But that's not failure. It's part of the training. What matters is that you begin to see those moments differently. Not as proof that you're weak, but as opportunities to become more aware. So instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" try asking, "What is this moment asking me to learn?" If this reflection resonated with you, leave a comment with one thing you're learning about yourself, and subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Continue the practice tomorrow.